for non-public hearing items and issues not on the agenda. So if we have any general public comments not to do with anything on the agenda, feel free to come up to the podium. And seeing none, we will move into the agenda. First item is what we call the Meekof Properties Lakeside Aggregate Sand Mine. Property addresses are 2471 Butterworth Southwest and 2100 2204 O'Brien Road Southwest. So what we will do is we're filling a little bit of double duty from the chair position today. So I will confirm that postcards were sent to the neighboring property owners within 500 feet of the site per our Chapter 34, which is the Walker Mineral Mining Code. This will be a public hearing. So procedurally, what I'll do is go through the conditions from last year, and all of the board members have been provided with these minutes. So the motion from last year, Connor's made a motion to approve the 2019 mineral mining license for Meekof Properties Lakeside Aggregates. And there was subject to 6 conditions. So I'm going to ask the applicant and the site engineer to confirm that these were done when they come up to do their presentation. Item number 1 was to provide a separate reclamation plan for our 2020 hearing. Topography for 2020 should indicate that there is no undercutting under 5 feet of the reclamation elevation. A density calculation is to be provided for the areas with fill greater than 5 feet, and a note be added to the plan to indicate that. Bond documents had to be provided by March 1st. A copy of a written agreement with the developers to the east of the site for mitigation of the slope was to be submitted, and then oil wells to be relocated below the reclamation contour, and a note indicating this should be added to the plan. So when we get to that point, I'll ask the applicants to bring us up to speed on those 6 conditions from last year. So why don't we start to get into a little bit of staff comment. Usually what I'll do is ask Rachel to give us an update on soil erosion permitting and fees. So Rachel.
All right, I sent out the fee notification last week. That's due by March 1st. And as far as soil erosion, there hasn't been a lot of activity in this mine, so I don't really have any comments with that. I mostly focused on the conditions from last year during my review.
Okay, so on deck from potential conditions of approval will be soil erosion sediment control fees by March 1st, 2020. And then we have the fence certification letter in the file for this year, but we do not have the updated bond paperwork. So we have 2 potential conditions of approval there for now. So if we, do we have any preliminary board comments to start before we have the applicant come on up? Hearing none, I'll ask the applicant to come on up with the plans. The document camera will be switched on for you folks. And if you'll walk us through what you did last year and what you propose to do this year, and then also address those 6 conditions. Do you know how to switch to document camera?
Is that better? Brandon Simon from Naderveld, representing Doug Meekof on this one. To kind of run through the conditions, we did submit a reclamation plan. As far as a reclamation plan, we have a final grading plan, but this site is undermined by the gypsum mine, so as far as like a build-out subdivision type reclamation plan, we don't have anything for that. We just have final contours. The topo for 2020 was completed. Does indicate that there's no significant undercutting. I think you'd mentioned no undercutting of 5 feet. We found no undercutting at all. The topo generally indicates that the mine floor is where the elevations are currently at, the finished grade mine floor. For the density calculations, there was no significant fill placed last year, so we don't have any density calculations to provide. There was some area that had been reclaimed by just adding some topsoil in what we'll call the west pit, which is what sheet 1 of 2 shows in our plans. So there's just some reclaimed area just off of Butterworth. We'll work on getting bond documents. I do have the soil erosion check and stuff here, so I'll drop that off for you in just a second. It's my understanding that the written agreement with the developers to the east was provided. If not, I can resend a copy of that for you guys. And then as far as the oil wells, those are communicated regularly with the owners of the wells. We can add some notes to our plans to make that, or make sure that doesn't get missed, but it's my understanding in conversation with Doug that occurs regularly throughout the process. Doug's in conversation with the owners, and they come out and raise and lower those accordingly. So thus far has not been an issue. Then as far as the work that occurred last year, I had mentioned sheet 1, there's a little bit of reclamation area. On sheet 2, which is the center pit, there was a little bit of mining, so you'll see that that's kind of been, that active face has been pushed around a little bit to the north. We have kind of maintained elevation along that east property line, and that's the plan moving forward, is just to continue to move that bank north. The agreement there shows that contours should be coordinated between property owners, and right now we don't have any plans to take this much significantly lower than it is right now. I know in the past it was discussed that the property to the east was permitted down to 644. I think we had brought that up last year. That was an old plan, just based on the materials that were found. The mine floor elevation as it sits right now is proposed to be relatively close to the mine floor moving forward. So that's all I got for that one, and invite any questions you might have.
Okay, why don't we see if we can open the public hearing before we get into staff comments or board comments. Could we get a motion to open the public hearing for this?
So moved.
Support, anyone?
Support.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Public hearing is open, so if you have questions regarding this mine site, feel free to come on up to the podium. Going once. Okay, can we get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Public hearing is closed with no comments. I will open it up to board member comments and questions.
There's not a whole lot of action plan-wise to address those comments, so. The easy one, I think, is number 1, to provide the reclamation plan. As you said, this is an undermined site. There's not a whole lot that can be done out here. I quite honestly can't remember what we were trying to do with that comment, unless it was more towards looking at park use and things like that. So I'll skip over that one. Number 2, you said there's no indication at all of undercutting under 5 feet. I guess when I look at sheet 1 of 2 in the phase 2 mining area, there are existing elevations 30 feet deeper than the proposed reclamation, which is obviously a very big amount of undercutting. 30 feet is way deeper than we allow, which is only 5 feet. So that's a concern. So you said that there wouldn't be any density calculations needed in number 3. I disagree with that.
I think, just to confirm, Scott, that my comment for the density calcs was that we don't have any to provide from this mining year, because there was no significant fill placed in that area.
Okay. But I
of
think,
the previous activity.
but the comments from last year, I think, were based on this exact spot and these issues. I don't want to just keep rolling those forward every year. I mean, we should resolve them at some point. So in this case, there's a 30-foot cut there.
Right.
So that's a big deal. I think maybe the reclamation side of this came into play when we were talking about what could happen out here, and that 95% compaction wasn't really necessary because there can't be any buildings or anything. But we still don't allow undercutting to you know, to anything greater than 5 feet. So that's not going to be glossed over. The written agreement, do we have that for the property to the east? Because there's a very significant, obviously, cliff there.
It sounds like it was submitted last year, but if they're willing to resubmit, I think that should be a condition for this year.
Yeah, I think resubmit, maybe share it with the board so that we can all get comfortable with that, because that's on sheet 2, obviously, but, you know, it's pretty severe, and I think the way that it's being mined, it looks like a lot of material from the neighboring site probably falls down based on the angle of repose into this site, and if I was the neighbor on the other side, I'd be a little concerned about that. That also plays into how that phase 3 on page 2 is going to take place, where the contours in that area are in the 720 range, the reclamation is in the 680 to 690 range, and then there's a note that says that mining permitted to 644. So it's all over the board. It's hard to follow.
Scott, can I interrupt a minute?
Sure.
Well, I just reading last year's minutes where, on page 4, where it spoke of if the floor elevation 690 at property line, the operation is allowed to go down to 644 to Grand Rapids side, that difference would be large. Ruth again affirmed an agreement with the property owner would be arranged. Connors agreed that and stated that reclamation contours that include the entire slope would be required. So I think that comes from you, and I, you know, like you say, we're just going around and around. So
Yeah,
sorry to
let's
interrupt,
solve
but
it.
I just.
Thank you. So I'd want to see that solved, and then the last thing about the oil wells, I do want to see a note on there for every one of those oil wells that says who owns it and how it's going to be cut down into what elevation, because we've had some failures in the past where telephone poles and oil wells were left perched up on thrones or down in holes, and, you know, we got to learn from that. So, sorry, there's my long list.
Okay, and before we get additional comments, one of the things that I'm going to ask Laura to help me out with, and with our new staff planner, is to use BSNA for tracking these conditions, so that we don't get stuck a little bit like we are today, not knowing which conditions were checked off and not. So that's something I'll ask Laura to follow up with me through BSNA, and we'll share that information. Additional board member comments, please.
I just, I think that the list we put out there and the things we covered last year need to be addressed, and if we gotta have another meeting to get answers to move forward, or, I mean, I'm one person up here, but, like Scott mentioned, that we gotta get it and get it done, and so I felt last year we agreed, everybody was in agreement to do it and get it done, and so I guess we're just asking to get the results.
So Scott, how do you recommend we move forward with this then?
I'm getting tired of just passing it forward and kicking the can down the road. I'd prefer that we maybe not approve it and wait for these answers. And some of them are going to require quite a bit of narrative, you know, like the undercutting, because I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah.
It's 30 feet deep.
Minimal.
So you're recommending, I hear you're crafting up a motion to table until we get full documentation on the minutes, per the minutes for the conditions from last year?
I'm not crafting up anything other than just bringing out those concerns at this point,
Well, let's talk about that too
because I
then.
think everybody needs to chime in.
So, you know, being new to the board, I would feel a lot more comfortable knowing that we're starting off with I mean, if these are the recommendations that were made last year, I feel like they should be in place before we move forward this year. I don't see a reason, I mean, unless there's a compelling reason to move forward without them. You know, I don't know, like I said, as long as that's what was in the notes, the record from last year, I think it should be honored this year before we move forward, so. Appreciate the work you've done on this.
No, I agree with Scott on that. If kicking it down the road isn't how can we improve it if it's not gonna get taken care of, and right now it hasn't, so.
One recommendation I would make, because I think the most difficult part here is the fact that we've got that big cut, is to redo the reclamation contours to take that into account. You know, if there's a possible way to do that. Because you can't really fix that, but it's kind of a sin that you might be able to work around a little bit.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm kind of looking at is, you know, there's area that's been reclaimed already, so we're kind of working up against that at this point. So to open that back up and reshape contours, I think is probably what that would take to get that significant cut removed, or sorry, significant fill removed. As far as, you know, density calculations and stuff, I understand your point on that. Then to play devil's advocate on the fact that it's not going to be developed moving forward, I don't, you know, what sort of, like count for those type of tests would you want, and frequency and spacing and all that? Because there's a pretty big area there where we're going to be reclaiming. So I just, a little clarification on, you know, how much you're looking for density calcs.
Right.
Is it the entire?
I'd prefer that we don't have to do any density calculations, would be my guess, because I don't think we've seen a set of those come in yet that were definitive and helpful. It seems like they're always vague, and we'll probably talk about some more of those later today, but find a way to set the reclamation contours so that they fit the mining contours. And I think that's what we struggle with so often, and that's why I would go back and look at your reclamation plan, and maybe that's where that came from last year, was you should redo the reclamation plan to fit the mining, because the two don't really fit together, especially in that phase 2 active area. But if you do have to go and do density calculations, we've been very open about how that gets done. It could be a narrative description of how you place fill, but 30 feet of fill is troublesome.
Yep.
And, along with, excuse me, along with that density, I mean, if it's, you have some, it may be a test, it may be sketchy, but, you should be able to walk on it, drive a pickup on it, or, I think the minimum's 90%. So, there's a settlement issue and everything else that goes with it, but I think it's a little bit of effort on the developers or on the mining part can go a long ways.
Okay, sounds like we're building towards a motion. Mr. Meekof's going to come up here for a second.
Doug Meekof, I'm the applicant. Morning, guys. Couple of the items here. As far as getting that agreement with Dan Schimmel, I think we got that to you guys. But we went forward and paid Dan, and we moved across that line. So is that not shown on the plans right now in the center pit, that we're across those lines? So we're working forward to take care of this stuff like you asked us to, and so we did that. And if you look right underneath phase 2 there, we moved that bank, the toe of that bank across the line. Money out of our pocket to do what you asked us to and take care of that. So that floor is set. We've already done that. Is there something more you want from me with Dan on that site? And I submitted that to you, and then, it got to the board somewhere, but I'll resubmit it. But then now we're past that line, and that's done. So there is no more need to go with what we're showing here across that line, but I can still submit that to you.
Isn't there more mining proposed to the north?
To the north, and then and we own the property to the east. That's our property. Okay. The dark line is because that's the city of Grand Rapids and the city of Walker line.
If you were to call out the Grand Rapids permit, show the Grand Rapids reclamation contours, that would make a ton of sense. But
Okay.
what we have today doesn't have it's harder to make that sense.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you guys know that we're doing what you're asking. We've been doing this for 30 years now, and we're doing what you're asking. The other thing about the compaction test there, we did not bring any fill, and I think Rachel would agree with that, into the west pit there, because you guys wanted to have Dan get done with his pit, so all of our fill went over to Dan's pit there. So we did not do anything there. That's why we have not done any compaction tests. There's been nothing brought in there.
I think in reference to the compaction testing, we're talking about the sheet 1 of 2 in that area that was reclaimed and behind there where there's that 30 feet of undercutting.
Yeah, so this is our fill operation now, much like Dan's doing it at the mines. We're taking this straight across, so I'm not sure what you mean about 30 foot of undercut. We mined it out and now we're putting fill back in. And I think we're making the land more stable. Well, we are making the land more stable. We're taking the sand out of there, which is like an hourglass, which when they shut the wells off in the mines, there is a lot of subsidence going on throughout the property, but wherever we've put clay, there has been none.
Well, you bring a lot of information to us, and sometimes the more information you have, the easier it is to approve and understand things. And if we can get that information, if that would be a condition upon issuing the permit or something, I could totally understand that. Or if there's something more you want, Scott, we could include that too. But
I don't want this to be all about me. I'm just reading the reports and looking at the plans. You guys just all pile on and agree with me, but.
No, but I agree, you're the engineer, and I agree with what you're asking for, and if you're happy with the information being provided, to me, it sounds good, so I guess I'm asking you if it's how it looks to you and Frank, I guess. So, but, yeah, as long as these two are working together and we're not gonna have a cliff or anything, that's things we don't know, so.
Yeah, I would just like it, I think we need to have it on the record that it's clarified, some of the information you've brought forth, just make sure we have that documentation. Like you said, so it's clarified and goes into the record. And I'll leave it to the experts, the engineers, to decide, what that looks like, what exactly it is you're asking for and what we need to have before we can confidently move forward on this.
So do you have a motion with a list of follow-up conditions?
I don't.
You don't?
I just have
Okay.
concerns about the stuff from last year, not
Okay.
being satisfied.
Okay.
It's not paper.
Do you want to, because I had some conditions prior to this secondary discussion that we just had. Do we just want to kind of move forward with those conditions and then what questions to answer to submit and document, so then we know these previous conditions have been met? Would the board be comfortable with that? So kind of stick with the conditions we had and then have you guys submit documentation that they have been satisfied?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused on what exactly you're asking for, though.
And that's where I think we need to be fair to every applicant, we need to give them a list of, here's what is short before we can issue a license. So somehow we need to get a punch list together that we can hand over that is quantifiable, that these guys can get back to us with. Another option we can do that we've done in the past is schedule a site visit in 6 months, see what's going on out there, and then do another follow-up meeting from that, asking for documentation That will take up most of the extraction and fill operations for this year. Something else we can do. Or we can just give them a punch list and say, here's the punch list to act on. When we receive these back, then we'll hold another meeting and review. So I'm looking to the board to help me out with that decision process.
I'm not sure a site visit satisfies any of the conditions that we saw here. It's mostly paperwork.
Okay?
So I don't know that extending it 6 months does a lot. I'd prefer to just see them
Okay.
address it. Again, I think my hint to them is to look at the reclamation contours and adjust those to minimize their need for extra work and density compaction and things like that.
So are you,
That's just a recommendation. That's just 25 years of experience designing and reviewing these kinds of things. They can do whatever they want.
well, you're the only PE up here, so I think we're all going to default to you. So Scott, if what you're asking for is the, essentially a packet of information from these folks quantifying that they've completed all the motion conditions from last year, come in, present that, here's the data, here's the data, here's the data, here's the data.
I think in writing, because I think Brandon
Yeah.
came in and went through the list and dismissed most of the items.
Okay,
I wasn't comfortable with that because I couldn't dismiss them as quickly.
okay.
I could go through the whole list again, but I'd just be repeating the things I said earlier, so.
I think the big question here, Scott, is, so on the west pit there, our original plan, we followed all the contours and we did what we said we were going to do. And then we came back with a new plan, with a new reclamation plan, showing that now we're coming back in and filling it in. So we didn't undercut anything to the original plan that we were showing, and then we changed our plan, and we're asking for a new plan. So, exactly.
So, because that's different, we don't, it's funny, because NPR was having a story this morning about a new state law, that talks about mining and trash, we're trying to make it easier, but there's the second part, of that is, does that turn into a film permit? We've got a lot of those, that, every truck that comes in with sand, if you want to put it back the way it was before, then it needs another truck with 2 trips in and out, for the neighbors to deal with, for the roads to deal with. I don't know that we're in the fill business so much as the mining and extraction business. If it's all one trip in and out, that's a little different. But we're not looking to have 30-foot cuts and 30-foot fills. I think the reclamation plan should fit in with the mining and extraction for the most part. That one was.
So then we would have to come back, if we show it that it's going to go down, then we'd be violating our plan with a fill permit then, or with filling it to how we want it to look in the end.
Well, what's the end use that you want to go 30 feet in? It just seems like a waste area, right? It's kind of a landfill for junk soil at that point.
No, it's inert fill, just like they did across the street with the Kent County, when they were building their amphitheater, and just like Dan's doing now at the mines and building it up. It's putting it back to how it was. We took the hill out, and now we're putting clay back in.
When was the bottom extraction topography approved? Or was there a date? Has this been going on for so long there?
In the west pit here, that was
Yeah.
probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, we've talked about this one quite a bit. I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Do we want to table or approve? Because we talked about tabling earlier. But then we heard more discussion, so I'm looking to the board to, do we want to approve following submitting a narrative addressing the comments from 2019?
Nobody's moving their heads at all here.
Right, I know.
I'm not super comfortable.
I think we ought to table till we get those conditions. I mean, that's what we've been asking, that's what was asked of, right? So, I would say table.
I guess what conditions are you asking for that we haven't met?
So the conditions from 2019 that we went through when we opened up this discussion, just to submit a narrative addressing those comments, such as the reclamation area, adding notes for the oil wells on the plan, and explanation on that east property boundary, resubmitting that agreement, and the plan showing that what your plan was out there, because it sounds like you have been working with a property owner. We just don't have record of that. So I'm looking to the board again.
So you're looking for 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 from last year? Because if there's no fill been hauled in, there's no need at this time for the density test for last year based on nothing has been hauled in.
Yes, I think it'll just be easier just to submit a narrative addressing all of them. So then if we know we just know they're all addressed, and then it's more clear just to go back, address each one with either a narrative or something shown on the plans.
Okay, so you want, which is fine, you want the agreement with Dan Schimmel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you don't need an agreement with us,
I think if you delineate that on the plan,
just throw that on the
we'll
plan,
be in
okay?
great shape. But that delineation should include the property owner names, should include the final reclamation contours, so we know you're working towards
Okay,
an appropriate boundary.
yep.
Because it doesn't make sense as you look at it today, right?
And then put the Jack Gooddale, or Pat, we work with him on the wells, just put that on there that we work with him.
And I think if you list out who owns it, what the future elevation for that's gonna be, and who's gonna do it.
Okay, all right. And then the compaction test we're saying was not needed because we didn't bring any fill in this year?
Just put a note in it that
But if your reclamation plan doesn't change, you're gonna have massive amounts of fill coming in, at which point I would, if it was me, write up a narrative on how you're gonna handle that.
Okay, so then going forward, then talking about the undercut, so how do you want us to proceed forward with that? It's showing a 30-foot undercut, but that was years ago that we undercut it. Now we're filling it. Do we have to do a different permit, a fill permit, or where are we at with that?
I'm not sure I understand that, because I think the way the marijuana ordinance was written was for extraction, and not to put things back exactly the way they were. If that was the case, we would have to have a 5-sheet plan set with a reclamation set, because it would just be the original contours. I don't think that's the intent, that it has to go back to the original contours. So I might look to Frank to help us out with some clarification on that, but
Yeah, and in the interim, I'll go into chapter 34 and see what it says about fill. And when does it just trigger, if you're filling back to original contours, is that a separate permit or not? So I'll keep in contact with you guys and do a review of that code.
Okay, so just leave it as is and you let us know on that?
Yeah, I'll let you know about that.
So, Frank, I don't, if they remove 20 feet, they fill back in 20 feet, my understanding was that, so when they leave, it was back same elevations, but technically it doesn't have to be if it's approved.
I think a good example is the Shoemaker sand mine, and I don't mean to put Mr. Shoemaker on the spot here, but, they are extracting sand, stabilizing the banks, and then their reclamation plan is showing future housing not at original contours, but at post-mine contours. And I think that's what I'm hearing here, which is this site has been mined down X amount of feet, and it's being filled back up to original contours. Technically, what is that? Is that a mining permit, or is that part of a separate fill permit? Is that
that seems fair.
Close.
Shoemaker's bit's a great example of what I think the ordinance is written. It's a good example of what the ordinance is written for, is to allow for a lower elevation with safe side slopes that protect the neighboring properties, that still provides for some future land use. In this case, it could be residential, it could be any number of things, because it's not been undercut. You know, you still have virgin soil there that you can put foundations on, build roads on, utilities. Here, we wouldn't have any of that.
And the specific, everything's a case by case. And the difference between the Shoemaker pit and this pit is the underground gypsum mines, right? So the underground gypsum mines pretty significantly limit the future use of this property. So, you know, just with that fact in mind, this may be a good fill site. But I think what we need to do is look at which code does it apply to. So that's what I'll look at and provide feedback to the board when we get your packet back. And when I hear Rachel building a motion here, so once we receive that information back from you, then we would renotice for an additional public hearing, another meeting, go through that, and by then we'll have some comment back from our ordinance review on, you know, where is this a mine and where is this a fill site? So we can start to quantify some things. So Rachel, I'll let you continue with your motion.
So what I'm going to do is account for this discussion that we had and just slightly relist the conditions from 2019 and try to best incorporate our comments from this year on those. So I'd like to file a motion to table this mining permit, subject to the following conditions. Resubmit a reclamation plan for 2020. We don't need the density calculations, correct? Okay, so we don't need density calculations. Submit a bond. Our bond document should be provided by March 1st. Submit a copy of a written agreement with the developers to the east for mitigation of the slope and show the proposed contours there. And add notes for every oil well, the owner, and the final elevation for that oil well. And was there anything else that I missed with that?
I think in the absence of a new reclamation plan, they should provide a narrative on achieving density, because it's such a severe amount. So if they choose not to submit a new reclamation plan,
All right.
and then the density does come into play. That's really their decision.
Okay.
That would seem fair if you could add that.
All right, so submit density if they need it, if they don't submit a new reclamation
So if
plan.
I read it like this, it's,
Okay.
I would ask that you amend the motion to say, in the absence of a new reclamation plan, the developer should provide a narrative on how they will achieve density in the areas of extreme fill.
All right. I'll see if I can, okay, I will amend the conditions in the absence of a reclamation plan to provide a narrative showing that how they will achieve density in the areas of massive fill.
What sort of,
Support that?
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Mr. Meekof, did you have a question?
what sort of density are you looking for, being that the whole site is undermined?
I would say the ordinance provides for both undevelopable and developable sites. So I'm going to direct you to have your engineer take a look in chapter 34, and we've got two standards in there for fill.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All right, we have a motion and support. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Tabled until we get that information back.
Sorry, that was rough.
No, that's fine. It's not pretty, but it's democracy. Yeah. Okay, give me 1 second. Next item on the agenda is what is called the Cordis Mine. And the address is 731 Maynard Avenue Southwest. Just to confirm that postcards were sent to neighboring property owners within 500 feet per the City of Walker mineral mining ordinance. And this case will be reviewed as a public hearing. So we'll follow the same process that we did last time. So let me, I don't know what the error is on the screen there, but we'll work it out. Okay. Thank you, Laura. So from 2019, we had 3 conditions of approval. The first was an end-use plan, including the possible connection to public water that would be provided to the Community Development Department within 6 months of the permit date. Number 2 was the soil erosion and sedimentation or sediment control fees will be paid by March 1st of 19. And then the survey dates would be clearly added to the plan prior to the 2020 hearing. And the goal of this condition is clarity regarding which areas were surveyed and the date that specific area of the plan was surveyed. So 3 conditions of approval on this one. From an administrative standpoint, we have the fence letter, we have the bond update. So we're down to those. Follow up from those 3 conditions from last year and then this year's soil erosion fees. So why don't we see if there's any preliminary comments from the board?
I was just gonna add that soil erosion fees have already been paid. They were paid last week. And I am seeing on this plan the clear, date of the survey.
Okay, so that takes care of 2 potential conditions. So now we're just down to conditions 1 and 2 from last year. And actually 2 is done as well, because that was 2019. So we're just down to item 1 as far as conditions go from last year.
And I think they've done a nice job with that too. The only
Yep.
thing I would add is that we want to make it clear on that plan that when it does develop, we want water main in there. Pretty serious health issues that we're dealing with down there. We spent a lot of city money to bring water to this area, and we want to make sure that that's part of the plan.
Okay, so potential condition would be for 2020, add a note to the end-use plan that there will be public water connections for each lot. Density matches what we allow by code in that part of town, which is a minimum lot, it's 1 acre minimum density down there. Okay, why don't we, what did we do last time? Did we open the public hearing last time, or did we, why don't we get public comments first? I'd look for a motion to open the public hearing.
So move.
Support?
Support.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the public hearing is open for the Cordis Mine at 730 Maynard. Feel free to come on up to the podium if you have questions or comments. Try and get those answered for you.
Well, thank you. I'm Joe Taylor. I'm a retired physician. I own, I don't know what a fair amount of land is, but I've watched the mining go on, and I used to come and complain about them, and I was about the only one. It's hard for people who are working to come, and I'm the only one that represents the landowners. I don't know. I suspect that may be true. Certainly they got a right to mine it. Heaven's sakes, those sand mines have been there forever, not objecting to that, but maybe the communication could be a little better. Have you got the picture, have you got the mine here? You can put up the...
Mr. Cordis, do you have your
okay.
plans? And if you would put that maybe up, Laura can get the document camera going.
The property I'm talking about is at 3250 O'Brien. We've lived there longer than, I don't live there now, but I've owned that land longer than anybody in the history of, since it was plotted. And I would think, to a certain extent, we could communicate a little better with the owners. I go out there and all of a sudden all the trees have been cut down. And obviously they got a right to do this, but I would have thought maybe they could have called up the night before and say, hey, Joe, we're going to cut the trees down and it's time to mine some sand out of there, and we could have communicated a little bit. And another thing I wonder about, are the survey stakes, you're responsible for the proper place of the surveys and stuff? And I wondered about that. I didn't think it was my responsibility to do that. And I also wonder about the steepness of the mining, and it sounds like you guys have addressed that right on with how the steep slopes and stuff like that. So that's basically what I had to say. And it looks like you're addressing a lot of that stuff, and I thank you very much.
I can help Joe out a little bit. I know the slopes around the southwest part of this site were allowed to be 1-on-3 when this originally came in 25 years ago because it was mined already. If you remember when they came in for their first permit, Diversco actually did that. The board said, that's so steep already, we can't make them put that back at 1-on-5. So 1-on-3 was allowed, and I think that's all established. The part on the east side doesn't have that same exemption, and I think that's supposed to be 1-on-5. So you still have that protection.
To be honest, it sounds like you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, additional public comments for the Cordis mine. While you're thinking about that, the board did do a site visit to this sand mine on, September 19th, 2019. And that was one of our follow-up items from last year. Okay, any further public comments? Going once. We'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So motion.
Do we have support?
Support.
Support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. Mr. Cordis, we would ask that you and your engineer walk us through what you did last year, what you're proposing to do this year. And if you would use the overhead camera and point, I think that's easier for everybody to understand. Not everybody's comfortable looking at these plans. You can go right to the
Is there a mic
camera.
over there also?
Yep, the camera's above your head, so you can look on the screens on the wall. And then you can see your hand, so you can point to the various areas on the plan.
All right, so as you had mentioned on this one, we did have a site visit in the fall. The steep slopes were brought up at the time. Mr. Cordis did go out after that visit and did knock those slopes down a little bit so that active face is a little less dangerous, a little less steep. They did install the silt fence and stuff around the top of the active face as well. As far as mining from last year, there was no significant reclamation area last year. It was really just a mining effort. So the active face of the mine was kind of pushed back to the west, and that's going to be the same tactic moving forward for 2020. Going to keep moving that west. We are getting close to the point where we have to start tapering back up to the property line so that we can meet that 1-on-5 slope for the finish grade. So we'll probably hit that this year, and we'll start working that slope out so we can have our finish grade meet the ordinance. As far as reclamation, there are some areas that we're potentially looking at, so potentially up on the northeast corner, there's a berm here on the Briggs property that may be kind of pushed south a little bit and that area reclaimed. Mr. Cordis is working with Mr. Briggs, and that berm is there kind of for a reason right now. It's good dust and noise visual screen, so they're working on that. That's really the only active or potential restoration area for 2020. Otherwise, the plan is to continue to move the face of this mine to the west until we hit our stop point and have to start working at.
Okay, and that stop point to the west runs into Dr. Taylor's property, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that property is west of my pen. You can see that on the screen here.
So it sounds like Dr. Taylor is asking you folks to coordinate and communicate a little better with him. So we certainly encourage you to do that. So if you can exchange contact information if issues come up, that way Dr. Taylor can contact you folks. And we would say the same thing with any of the neighbors. Okay, why don't we open it up to board member comments? Feel free.
I just wanted to add that, yes, on that, far east slope, we do have those good reclamation contours that show that they blend up really well and stay out of that 30-foot required buffer, so that's great. So we got that last year, right? And then I did note in December 2019 that really steep slope noted during our site visit had been knocked down quite a bit, so. And I think, yeah, those are my only comments with the site.
Okay, further board comments?
Other than it appears they're following the ordinance and they're doing what we've asked, so, I'm just curious, say you're gonna keep moving to the west, so you got a couple of years yet, or?
Yeah, not real long. Could I add a couple things too? All right, I apologize, Mr. Taylor, that we didn't contact you. We have a really good relationship with all the other neighbors there. But, I mean, I know you don't contact me when you keep their trees, but that's okay. We will from now on keep the communication open there. I actually thought about, and I know you don't live there anymore, you live across the street or whatever, but I actually thought about going there and telling them what we were gonna do, but it was kind of a hectic year this year, and we thought we were gonna move more sand than what we did, so we wanted to get the trees and stumps out of the way, but, quite a few years ago, we changed, we changed from the 10-foot from the lot line to the 30-foot. And those stakes, that's all staked at 30 feet, steel, T-posts, 7-foot T-posts along that whole 30-foot, which was, I'm not sure the owner of this property now, but it was the owner of camp, whatever, that was originally part of Doc Taylor's property years ago. But anyway, we bought that last back 4 acres, and that's staked at 30 feet as well. And when the guy came in there to cut the trees, I said, do not cut any trees between the 30-foot and the lot line. So we obviously are not gonna take any sand from there. And we're gonna start the slope right about at that 30-foot. And we already started the slope already. So, when you get from here north, this area here, we're not even gonna touch any of that because it wouldn't be advantageous at all. The natural flow of the water comes down and then goes to that pond area, and then we've been doing that for thousands of years or whatever. We're not gonna change that. So what we're after is this part here. So if we get a big job this year or whatever, that's gonna take a pretty good bite of that. And then we'll just blend the contours with the existing here for that panel. So it'll look nice when we're done there. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that we have respected the 30-foot from the lot line buffer with clearing trees, and we obviously won't get anything out of it.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Mr. Cordes. Further board comments? If there are none, the only condition that I've got hanging out there is that on the site reclamation and use plan, there be a note added for public water connections will be made for each lot. Other than that, I'll open it up for a motion.
Make a motion to approve with that singular condition unless Rachel has something else to say after. I think we're covered, right? Okay, so I made that motion with the one condition that the reclamation and end-use plan show a standard note denoting that public water main will be used for those lots.
I support that.
We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? Okay, then all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, Mr. Cordes, you have your permit for the year 2020. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? On the site plan, it shows the side on O'Brien, which, I think is where the Seatsma is taken out for the houses there. There is, you can see where the stakes are for the property. And I know that, I guess isn't operated as a sand mine, but his, where he's taking sand is right up to the stake. There's no 30-foot buffer. Is that not necessary if he doesn't operate it as a sand mine?
Well, we closed the public hearing, but let's.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean,
Yeah. This is for the Cordis sand pit?
no,
No.
it was Sandco, I guess.
Was Sandco.
You mean adjacent to the new residential homes that are going
Yeah.
Mr. Seatsma has one.
Yeah.
Mr. Feenstra had one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, Frank, the threshold there wasn't such that it would allow or require an mining permit. It was underneath the threshold to be considered single-family residential construction. So that's not bad.
Yeah, there is a minimum in the code of 5,000 cubic yards in order to be considered a commercial sand mine.
But I'm just curious for lot line. You can see the stakes on the road where it goes back, and the sand is right up the stakes. There's no, I don't know who owns, I'm saying maybe Sandco owns a property next to his.
They might have, in that case, if those were developed as single-family lots, which I think they were, right? And they didn't exceed 5,000 cubic yards, then they could clear sand right to the property line.
Yeah, I don't dispute that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying you can see where a lot line is, and they're right on top of the lot line with their sand removal.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that's normal, or
Yeah.
they don't have to adhere to the 30-foot line, or that's all I'm,
Yep, and I remember us having that discussion a couple of years ago on those two properties, and because they didn't meet the qualification to be a commercial sand mine, they didn't have to meet the 30-foot no disturb buffer. So then they were allowed to clear to their property lines.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last but certainly not least for the morning session here is what is generally referred to as the Shoemaker and Sons sand mine at 4480 Burton Street Southwest. And to do a quick review of the conditions from last year, item number one was we required a current end use plan, including a statement about the time of sand mining completion. Item number two is the issuance of a separate reclamation plan to be provided in 2020 that is consistent with the City of Walker master plan, particularly in regards to the allowable density on the site for residential use. Item number three was that slopes would not exceed 1-on-3 at the edge of the site, and undercutting not to exceed 5 feet. And item number four is to complete the on-site reclamation near the Schwartz property. We have received the fence letter. We have not received an updated bond letter. And I'll let Rachel discuss the soil erosion and soil sedimentation control fees. So take it away, Rachel.
Mr. Shoemaker just dropped those off to me, so that's been taken care of.
Done.
the fees.
So we checked the box on that. So now we're down to just the new bond verification letter as one condition of a potential approval on this site. Okay. And why don't any preliminary board comments on this one?
On the end use plan, same deal with the water, we've got the same kind of issues down here. But we may also want to consider having that extend the right-of-way to the south based on master plan discussions that you've had, Frank, because that could very easily extend further south.
And just so you folks know, we have an active, what we call a sub-plan, part of a master plan on this site. It's called Sub-Plan 2. And essentially, that's what is going to end up in the new 2020 master plan. So what Scott is referring to are two things that are in the ordinance, number one, or excuse me, in the new master plan. Public water to be provided to all of these lots, single family, 1 unit per acre minimum. And then also the road connection, at least dash to the south property line, as opposed to just ending in a cul-de-sac. So those are two potential conditions of approval on the reclamation plan, or excuse me, the end use plan. Anything further? Okay, then why don't we get a motion to open the public hearing?
Make the motion.
Do we have support?
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is open. If you have any questions or comments about the Shoemaker and Sons sand mining operation on Burton Street, please feel free to come up to the podium. Not a talkative crowd this morning. That's okay. All right, well then I'd look for a motion to close the public hearing. Support?
Support.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Shoemaker, we'd ask that you come on up and discuss your operation from last year, what you're proposing for this year, and if you would use the overhead with the plan and point to things that would help everybody understand. However you want to do it. You're always invited to come on up, but if you want to pay Netterveld to do it, then that's fine too. They're already here, right?
All right, so for this one, as far as operations from last year, we did reclaim the northeast corner of the site here, so this new area that's shaded in has been marked as reclaimed. The mining operation largely occurred along the north end of the site, kind of pushing this bank around. At this point, the mine bottom floor is at 664, which is right where we are showing our final grades for the end-use plan, which is the reclamation plan. So the mine bottom is kind of right where it needs to be, and moving forward in 2020, it's more of the same. We're just going to chase this active face around to the northwest. I think those are the big points on it. There's not a ton on this one. We're estimating at this point probably under 5 years to finish everything up and get reclamation. So, any comments that you might have on this problem?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cordes. Sound carries in this room really well, so why don't we open it up to board member comments?
How about the oil well and the overhead power lines? I don't know if they're matched up yet. I tried getting out there this morning and I couldn't get to too many sites. All I saw was a Good Samaritan over on Waldorf plowing his neighbor's driveway. That's the only good news that I saw today. Commissioner Kent there. So where do we sit with the well and the overhead lines?
As far as how they fit into the end use?
Yes.
That's something that we'll have to coordinate relocation of. I don't know if you have anything you want to add on how those, or maybe you've had discussions on the oil wells?
And maybe not so much the end use as even today, because I'm looking at the way that that's delineated, and it looks like there's lots of poles. Maybe there aren't lots of poles, but are the poles being lowered as you're moving north?
No, last year that was all done, we lowered the oil well.
Okay.
Center, the north well, there's 2 oil wells. The north oil well did not get lowered. The power line comes from Burton Street to that well, and then from that well, there was new poles installed, extra tall, the trucking,
Okay.
that went to the oil well that's in the center. That's all brand new.
Perfect. Thanks.
So does that need to be added to the plan, or?
I think if they've done it and we don't require them to show elevations
Okay.
typically on things like that, I just couldn't get to it.
So just for the record, let's make sure that we get that in the minutes then, right? Okay? You got it. All right, further comments from the board?
gonna add that when I go out there once a month, just that area that's being reclaimed to the north. They're just doing a nice job kind of slowly moving to the northwest. Even that last section was brought to final grade, and I think it just has to be seeded, the area that's marked to be reclaimed in 2020. So I think there's really good progress on reclaiming the site as they mine.
Scott, I might add, we were concerned with the property line there. That corner, we've gone west past the corner. That's another thing, so from there on, it's gonna be beyond that 30-foot mark.
Mr. Kent?
I was just curious when this would probably end and what, Scott spoke of city water and, is there a plan for this? So I can't find my notes. I'm lost on this one a little bit, but that's two things that come to mind anyways.
Well, the water exists at Wilson and Burton there. So like the lots of developments like this, we want to make sure that it's extended. If you look back at 10 to 15 years, we've had a few states that we made up, that were in meadows, Sylvan Dale, and people came in 5 years later and said, why can't we have water? We were 1 year away from getting that to those developments before we got in. And now they've all got an entire movement of full special processes to take care of things. We just gotta make sure that we get that out there. The key, I think, on the south end, what you see what the master plan calls for, making sure that we have the transportation and water connectivity to the south also. So that you don't have to do any fancy looping, it goes into your property line, and somebody else will do it. Cool.
I'm good, Frank.
Okay, Carol? Gary? And let's come back to Rachel.
I just had one other comment, just from the previous conditions. It said end use plan, is there a date of estimated completion provided? I might have missed it, or do we not have that date?
No, yeah, I think last year just what we communicated, it's obviously market driven, but we probably within 5 years of having the site finished.
I think we've learned a lot too from like Dan Schimmel's site where the mines was going to be mined in 1 year, and here we are in like year 14. We just have to be flexible with the,
We can think about
Market will
that
push it.
this afternoon.
yeah.
I was just following up on that condition, so.
Okay, and that's, is that it? And let's just quick run down those conditions from last year. I think you've done item 1, which is what you've got up on the screen there, which is kind of a conceptual layout for future rural residential, for lack of a better term, density, single-family housing. Reclamation plan. Do we have that? Are we comfortable with number 2, separate reclamation plan, consistent with the master plan?
That is our submittal,
Okay,
we're just showing we can move that reclamation around the north edge following behind the mining operation.
okay,
I think these guys they've done this a little different than others where once they've reclaimed an area, they adopt those elevations as the reclamation contour, which I think makes a ton of sense. Because it doesn't muddy this up as much. So what they're showing is just reclamation in the areas yet to be mined. So it seems to help.
okay. Item number 3 has to deal with slopes not exceeding 1-on-3 at the edge of the site, and no undercutting greater than 5 feet. We okay with that? All right, hearing none. Last is complete the reclamation of the site near the Schwartz property. Are we comfortable with that?
Yep.
Okay, that leaves 3 items from what I've run through here for conditions. We'll need the updated bond letter by March 1st. And then 2 notes on the end use plan, that lots will be served by public water, and that the main street shown on that plan will be dashed to the south lot line. And who knows how long that'll take.
I will make the motion as you suggest.
So we have a motion with those conditions. Do we have any support? Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Mr. Shoemaker, I have your permit for 2020. Thank you. All right, let's see how we've got this on the agenda. Any board member or staff comments?
Do we have to do another election of officers or anything this time around? It's all in one day. I thought I better ask now.
Why don't we add that, why don't we do that now, because this afternoon's may take a little bit longer. So if anyone wants to, we have current officers, right? We have a board chair, a vice chair, and I think that's it. Or do we have a secretary too? No, I think we've just got a board chair and vice chair. And I'll leave that up to you folks. You want to leave it like it is, that's fine with me. But we would need a motion to do so.
I'll make a motion to keep it as is.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, officers will be the same. Last but not least, we have Mineral Mining Board minutes from November 26th of 2019, which I think was follow-up on the Mines Golf Course, which we'll see this afternoon. So I would look for a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll approve. I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, so the minutes from November 26, 19 are approved. So Laura, we can publish those to iCompass as approved. And then just a motion to adjourn, and then we'll see you at 1 o'clock.
I did just have one kind of nitpicky comment.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I've just been having such a hard time thumbing through the minutes to what mine we're talking about now because the agenda changes every time.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if we could just, on the top of the minutes, just put the names of the mines that are
Yeah.
in them, just so I can find them easier when we're setting up here the next year.
Okay. Well, we'll deal with that, and maybe we'll only give you the conditions from last year.
Yeah, some sort of summary or something.
Yeah.
I know there's one, it's like if the title's towards the bottom of the page, I can't find it.
Yeah.
I find it, I was having trouble with that last one, and
Yeah.
so over here it's one thing, and over here it's the Shoemaker pit, and then, and then you look at the minutes, and it's like, I would love to have, for example, the mines minutes with the mines plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of simple, I realize, but when you get, 10, 12 pages, you're thumbing through trying to, all right, which one? So,
That's absolutely critical. I did the same thing. My first practice at this was to go through and pull all those minutes out and take a Xerox of that and put it with each plan because it's so critical to go back and make sure we're fixing things.
felt like I was shuffling blackjack.
Yeah. How about if next year we get some drone photos of these too, because
Yeah.
we've kind of gotten away from that. That is so helpful. And I think the technology is way better now. We could have one of our consultants, I think all of our consultants have drones. We could have them go do that quite easily.
That is a good idea.
And that's a good way to see those edges of these sites, like Meekof, their fill area hasn't been fill or accessible in a couple months. So it's nice to have that visual on that, in those areas that I don't get to.
We'd have to notify because otherwise they might have shotgun practice.
I don't think you can, in that part of town, it's, yeah. Okay, so we'll add that to our agenda for next year to get some drone photos next fall. Anything else before we adjourn?
I may have to bust out the next one about 2:30 because we've got an in for grant
Yeah.
wrap up. But hopefully we'll get done by then. If not, I'll just slide out.
Well, let's target being done by 2:30 this afternoon. We only have 3 mines. This one took us less than an hour and a half. And one of them this afternoon is a closeout, so hopefully we'll be able to be done by 2:30. So we are adjourned. I will see everybody at 1 o'clock. Thank you.